A very good noon and Jai Hind, dear students. Welcome to the virtual class of English. Yesterday we had already done some of the portion of our chapter The Enemy, and today we are taking it up from where we have left it yesterday. So on page number 26, the last paragraph, a fisherman perhaps. From here, we need to start our chapter today. So till in our last video, we have covered about the childhood of Dr. Sadao, about his father, about his family, how he met Hannah, and how finally they got married. Now, let's read. A fisherman. Okay, a fisherman, perhaps, Sadao said, washed from his boat. He ran quickly down the steps, and behind him, Hannah came, her white sleeves flying. A mile or two away, on either side, now we are on this page, beta. A mile or two away on either side, there were fishing villages, but here was only the bare and lonely coast, dangerous with rocks. The surf beyond the beach was spiked with rocks. Somehow the man had managed to come through them. He must be badly torn. So as I told you in my last video that there was mist all around, and from that mist they saw a man appearing from that, and afterwards that man fell down, and after seeing that image, that man, Hannah reacted, and she asked that who was that man. And now Sadao is replying to that question only. Sadao is saying that as the area had villages full of fishermen, Sadao had said that probably it was a fisherman who had been washed off his boat. He ran to help him, and Hannah followed him. The loose sleeves of her haori, I told you she was wearing a traditional Japanese cloth, and the loose sleeves of her haori flew as she ran. This part of the coast was not inhabited, means many people were not residing in this part of the coast, okay, as it had dangerous rocks on it. As the rocks were pointed, the man could be badly injured, although he had managed to come through them, because this part is quite rocky surface it was having, and if a man has surfed through that part, that means he must have had a kind of he was surfing over the rocks, and maybe this could be one of the reason that he could be badly injured, though he had managed to come, means he was having enough strength. Okay, here spiked means covered with sharp points. Now let's see. They saw when they came toward him that indeed it was so. The sand on one side of him had already a stain of red soaking through. A stain of red means blood stain. So as this Japanese couple saw the man, they realized that he was badly injured. And how do they realized? Because the sand on which he lay had blood stains on one side, which indicated that he was wounded, injured. He is wounded, Sadao exclaimed. He made haste to the man who lay motionless, his face in the sand. Here the description of the prisoner is given in this paragraph, in these lines. An old cap stuck to his head, soaked with sea water. He was in wet rags of garments. Sadao stopped Hannah at his side and turned the man's head. They saw the face. A white man, Hannah whispered. Now see, dear students, Sadao said that the man was wounded because there was blood. He approached the man, and the man was motionless, and his face was buried in the sand. An old cap hung on his head, and that cap was soaked with the sea water. His dress was also wet and torn. Sadao turned the men's head. They turned the men's head to see. And as they saw the face, Hannah spoke confidentially that he was a white man, an American. Yes, it was a white man. The wet cap fell away, and there was his wet yellow hair, long as though for many weeks it had not been cut, and upon his young and tortured face was a rough yellow beard. He was unconscious and knew nothing that they did for him. The injured man was an American. As his cap fell off, dear students, the couple saw his wet yellow colored hair, which had not been cut for a long time. That American was young. His face had such marks which indicated that he had been tortured. He had a rough, unkempt yellow colored beard. As he had fainted, he did not know of the presence of Sadao and Hannah. Now see. Now Sadao remembered the wound, and with his expert fingers he began to search for it. Being a doctor, automatically his fingers started searching for the wound. Blood flowed freshly at his touch. On the right side of his lower back, Sadao saw that a gun wound had been reopened. The flesh was blackened with powder. Sometime, not many days ago, the man had been shot and had not been tended. Tended means cared for or looked after. It was bad chance that the rock had struck the wound. Sadao was reminded that the man was wounded, as he had seen blood stains on the sand. As he was a doctor, he moved his trained fingers around the man's back to search for the wound. Now see, dear students, as he was a doctor, he moved his trained fingers around the man's back to search for the wound. He felt blood oozing out of a wound. Oozing means coming out. Okay, oozing out of a wound in the lower part of his back. It was a gunshot. He immediately get to know. The man had been injured a few days ago. These are the findings of Dr. Sadao when he saw the man at the seashore. He had not got any medical help to treat the wound, as he had himself used some black colored powdery substance on it. Means that American himself has put some powder, black color powder. The sharp rocks on the shore had pierced it, and so it was bleeding. So he immediately at once recognized that the bleeding is because of the reopening of an old wound. Oh, how he is bleeding, Hannah whispered again in a solemn voice. The mist screened them now completely, and at this time of day no one came by. The fishermen had gone home, and even the chance beachcombers would have considered the day at an end. Solemn means serious and concerned. And beachcomber are, you can say, vagrants or someone who makes a living by searching beaches for articles of value and selling them. तो जो बीच के किनारे कुछ ढूंढने आते हैं उन्हें बीच कॉम्बर्स बोलते हैं, राइट? Hannah was concerned. Now let us see the explanation of this para. Hannah, she was highly concerned that the man was injured, and she said in a low voice that he was bleeding. The mist had intensified now, means it has grew more darker, more intense, more dense. The three of them, now they are three, Hannah, Dr. Sadao and the American prisoner. So the three of them could not be spotted by anyone. Moreover, the fishermen and the rag pickers, you can say, beachcombers, did not visit the place at that time of the day. Okay? Now let's see. What shall we do with this man? Sadao muttered. But his trained hands seemed of their own will to be doing what they could to stanch the fearful bleeding. Stanch means beta stop, or to stop a flow of blood from a wound, that is stanch. He packed the wound with the sea moss that strewed the beach. The man moaned with pain in his stupor, but he did not awaken. And now we are on page number 28 here. Okay? So muttered means to speak in a low voice. Sea moss is a kind of a seaweed, small green plants, sea moss. Strewed, here it means to be scattered untidily over a place or area. Moaned is a cry when you are in pain and you cry, that is called moaning. And stupor here means a state of unconsciousness. Stupor means a state of unconsciousness. Okay, so now they are having a conversation like, what shall we do this man? Mr. Sadao, Dr. Sadao, he muttered in a low voice, he spoke. And but his trained fingers, they were continuously want to stop that blood flow. So what he did, he packed the wound with the sea moss, okay, which was all over scattered over there on the beach. And the man, he cried in pain, though he was still very unconscious. His state was unconscious, and he did not awaken. Now see, the best thing that we could do would be to put him back in the sea, Sadao said, answering himself. Now that the bleeding was stopped for the moment, he stood up and dusted the sand from his hands. Yes, undoubtedly that would be best, Hannah said steadily. But she continued to stare down at the motionless man. If we sheltered a white man in our house, we should be arrested, and if we turned him over as a prisoner, he would certainly die, Sadao said. The kindest thing would be to put him back into the sea, Hannah said. But neither of them moved. They both were talking about throwing him back into the sea. But nobody was doing anything. Means their conscience was not allowing them to throw that man back into the sea. They were staring with a curious repulsion. Repulsion means a strong dislike. So they were staring with a curious repulsion upon the inert figure. Inert means motionless. Now let's see the explanation part. Sadao answered to himself and said that the best thing was to put the man back into the sea. यही best है अभी इस time पे. And as the bleeding stopped, he stood up. Dr. Sadao stood up and removed the dust from his hands because he has put that seaweed, no? Hannah supported his opinion, but looked intently at the man as he lay still. Sadao said, that if they gave him shelter, they would be arrested for sheltering an enemy. If they handed him over to the Japanese army as a prisoner, then he would die in the prison. क्या करें? What shall we do now? The conflict, the problem, the trouble? As he thought that both the options were not favorable, so the best option was to put him back into the sea. Okay, because they were highly confused. What shall we do? Shall we give it to the Japanese army, or shall we take it home? And when they did not come to any conclusion, they finally decided the best option is to put him back into the sea. Hana added that the kindest act for them was to put him back into the sea. She also agreed. Both of them did not move ahead to do so. Rather, they stared at the motionless figure with dislike because he was an American. They disliked him. Why? Because he was an enemy. Why he was an enemy? Because he was an American. Now, let's see. What is he? Hana whispered. There is something about him that looks American, Sadao said. He took up the battered cap. Yes, there, almost gone, was the faint lettering. A sailor, he said, from an American warship. He spelled it out, U.S. Navy. The man was a prisoner of war. Battered, there is a word battered, and battered means here torn and worn out. पूरी तरीके से फटा हुआ, कटा फटा हुआ. Okay, that is known as battered. Now see, Hana, she was very inquisitive. She was very curious, very eager. She used to ask a lot of questions. So she was quite inquisitive as she asked about the man's identity. Ki, who is this man? And Sadao replied that he appeared to be an American. Why he said this way? Because of his appearance, as we have already discussed, the physical appearance. He was having a white, fair complexion, brown hairs and all. And further they find something else. What? He picked up the torn cap, and read the words written on it, which were very, very slightly visible. He said that the man was a sailor from an American warship, and read out the words U.S. Navy written on the cap. And then they concluded that the man had been taken into captivity during the war. Okay? Now let's move. He has escaped, Hana cried softly, and that is why he is wounded. In the back, Sadao agreed. Now, Sadao and Hana discussed what? That the man must have tried to escape from the prison and had been shot in the back. That he must have tried to escape, he must have tried to run from that prison, and during all this event or incident, he might have got this gunshot in the back. Now see, they hesitated, looking at each other. Then Hana said with resolution, "Come, are we able to put him back into the sea?" Now see, dear students, they were not able to gather the courage to throw him into the sea. Hana called upon Sadao with firmness. She was quite firm this time, and she asked him if he was ready to put him into the sea. And now see what response he is getting. कितना conflict है आप देखो. Just look at feel the mental state they are going through at that moment. Imagine, visualize this. If I am able, are you? Sadao asked. Means they are passing on, they are lingering on. No one is ready actually. So what Dr. Sadao asked, that if he was able to do so, he asked that did Hannah have the courage for it? No, Hannah said. But if you can do it alone. And Hannah replied, in what? In the negative. And she said that if he could not do it by himself, then she had to help him. Now see, Sadao hesitated again. The strange thing is, he said that if the man were whole, I could turn him over to the police without difficulty. I care nothing for him. He is my enemy. All Americans are my enemy. And he is only a common fellow. You see how foolish his face is? But since he is wounded, because dear students, here they are just finding out some sort of excuse, because the humanitarian side of there is not allowing them to throw that man in such a situation. Actually, their kindness, their generosity wanted to help that man. But because there is a conflict of patriotism and duty, they were quite confused. What shall we do? And when they are lingering on the messages, when they are saying, are you being able to? Let us do this. Will you be? So in that way, they are just finding an excuse to save that man. Now see, Sadao hesitated again means Sadao was reluctant in throwing the man into the sea. And he reasoned that if the man was well, क्या रीज़न दिया उसने इसके लिए? उसने कहा कि अगर this man was properly well, perfectly all right, he would hand him over to the police without any hesitation. Immediately, at once, he would have given that man to the police. He added that he was not concerned about the man and considered him to be an enemy as he was an American. He commented that the injured man was a common man and his face looked as if he was a foolish person. He wanted to say that he was not bothered about the injured man, but his only concern was that he was wounded. So, if you can make out, dear students, see, they are finding the excuse. Now, what excuse they have found? Like, this man is not, if this man would be properly, perfectly all right, this man would have not been injured, wounded, I would have given it straight away to the police. But because he is wounded, again, what is it? Is it a kind of an escape which you are looking for? You want to help that man, but you are got stuck in between your duties towards your nation, your country, and duty towards your doctor, your profession, and toward humanism, you can say. Right? Now let's see. You also cannot throw him back to the sea, Hannah said. Then there is only one thing to do, and that is we must carry him into the house. So finally, after a long discussion, after spending so much time over there on the beach, after putting seaweed, helping that wounded man, looking for him, after seeing the blood stain, after getting his identity and everything, finally Hannah said that if he could not throw him into the sea, means Dr. Sadao could not throw him into the sea, then the second option was just to carry him home. But the servants, Sadao inquired. Now see, Sadao was concerned that the servants would object as they would shelter an enemy. So he said, okay, fine. See, when Hannah insisted, no, dear students, when Hannah said that now the last option is just to carry this man at home, Hannah, she understood Dr. Sadao very nicely. She was the better half. So she knew her husband everything, her husband's emotions, and that was the reason she understood that Dr. Sadao really wanted to help this man. He doesn't want him to throw back into the sea, and that's the reason she decided, and she said firmly in the last, that now the only option left is to take this man home. But again there was a problem coming into the Dr. Sadao's mind, and what was that? He started thinking about the servant. He thought, what servant, what we will do with the servants? Servants would object if we will take if we will shelter an enemy, if we will take this man back to our home, then our servants would object, and it can be possible that they will go and tell the police about it or the army about it. Okay, so see how the whole conflict they are going through. We have covered till here today, and in next video I am going to cover the remaining part. I want you all to read this chapter. Dear students, be prepared, read the chapter, do revise your lessons timely, keep practicing, stay happy and stay safe. Thank you.